Just a few weeks into the release of Starfield, and over 10 million copies have been sold. But there are plenty of gamers that just don't have the option to play the new title. Some due to boycotts, most due to lack of hardware, and a few left who have finished the game and are looking for something else to fill that void. It's the Dove here to give you a list of Starfield alternatives. Now let's just get this out of the way. None of these games are exactly like Starfield. If they were, Microsoft would be deploying lawyers like flying monkeys from The Wizard of Oz. No, I'm going to list games that hit some of the same metaphorical notes as Starfield. And since Starfield clapped the metaphorical cakes of my computer, I need to find an alternative. So, let's just get into it. One of the easier recommendations you can make for Starfield alternatives is No Man's Sky. It is a massive, and I mean massive, space exploration game with a strong dose of survival elements. Yes, this game was an absolute disaster when it released, as it overpromised and underdelivered on many of the marketing claims. But years and years of updates and patches, this game is one to try, especially for a space nerd like me. You start off not knowing who you are or what you're doing, then slowly you find your way into a spaceship rifling through a galaxy of mystery. The game has story elements, and you do have to decide how to respond in interactions. But this is in no way close to the story and role-playing elements of Starfield. It also has some combat, both in space and on the planets, but it is not a huge focus. So there is little to nothing if you want a first-person shooter. But the ship piloting and exploration blow Starfield out of the water. There are 60 quadrillion star systems in No Man's Sky to explore. A lot of the maps are procedurally generated in No Man's Sky, but the same could be said of Starfield. The ship combat is very comparable to Starfield, but the piloting makes the game feel more like I am in a starship. Where Starfield is a lot of cinematic cuts and fast travel, No Man's Sky makes you do the dirty work of entering and exiting a planet's atmosphere and piloting to far-off locales. Yes, it does have fast travel elements, but the interplanetary and interstellar travel from No Man's Sky is just light years ahead of Starfield. Where it lacks RPG, it more than makes up for in exploration. This game is humongous with the 60 quadrillion systems to explore. Check it out on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. The next one is a bit on the older side, but Star Trek Online is astonishingly close to some of what Starfield is trying to do. It was released back in 2010 and is now a free-to-play game. Unfortunately, you can completely see the issues with a decade-old game pretty quickly, with the ugly character design to the jaunty camera. But when you look past the horrific graphics, there is a lot to like about this game. You work your way through the ranks of the Federation, albeit you are running a ship almost on your first day. Once in charge, you select your crew and ship and get to work. The first ships are small, and you work your way up to the Galaxy-class ships. Aside from managing your crew, you take the assignments that you want and travel when and where you like, missions withstanding. The absolute best part of the game is the ship-to-ship combat and just flying around the universe. They really nailed that part. Star Trek Online has over 350 star systems to explore, so it might have a leg up on the 120 from Starfield. However, almost every planet you land on in Starfield has a whole planet's worth of map to explore, and Star Trek Online has a few small area maps to beam down to. So deep down, I think Starfield wins overall exploration. The game does have a lot of references to the show, and many actors from the series voice their characters in the game.
This is Captain Harry Kim of the USS Inouye. We require immediate assistance.
There are also plenty of planets and systems referenced in the show, so there is a lot for Trekkies to love. The combat is not great, and feels a lot like turn-based old-school RPG like Knights of the Old Republic, but bad. So no first-person shooter in the style of Starfield either. But for those old-school Bethesda fans, you might not entirely hate that combat. So check out Star Trek Online if you'd like on PC, Xbox, or PlayStation. Mass Effect Legendary Edition, or just any of the first 3 Mass Effect games, would be the next recommendation. The Legendary version of Mass Effect includes Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. While you could play any of these by themselves, If it is your first time playing Mass Effect, I would recommend the full Legendary version, as it just smooths out everything from one game to the next. It is a third-person style space exploration meets combat meets RPG. It has a lot of what people loved about the original Knights of the Old Republic, but with more of a home brand Star Trek twist. The gun combat is not my favorite, as they go from third person to first person depending on your weapon. The special abilities add a cool RPG element to the game, while also giving you options in combat. Although I said it was like Star Trek in ways, the special abilities or biotics definitely give a Jedi vibe. I still enjoy the depth it adds to combat, so I think it fits right in. There is a lot of exploration in the earlier Mass Effects that the game has dumbed down over the versions. There is still a good chunk to explore with 34 different systems to visit, but not all can be landed on, and the exploration on those planets can be limiting. But there is still a lot of time to spend in each game's given universe. The RPG element in Mass Effect is quite strong, so is the storylines, and they're really where the game might even outshine Starfield. Through the 3 games, choices you make and alliances you make really matter and have an outcome on the end of the overall series. In other words, the choices you make in the game seem to actually make a difference, and those differences shine in each ending for the games. It doesn't have the great quick movement near battle royale feel in combat that Starfield does, and that's okay. It is its own brand, and although it can be incredibly clunky in comparison, it's still an enjoyable title. If you're looking for an exploration game with a good RPG slant on combat, then I fully recommend Mass Effect, available on PlayStation and Xbox. Next, I want to talk about a game that seems it shouldn't be spoken in the same sentence as Starfield, but when you look at some of the core elements, you might be mistaken. Marvel's Guardian of the Galaxy is a third-person shooter with RPG elements, space combat, and in my humble opinion, some of the best voice acting for a video game ever. I enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy a lot, and have played through it a number of times. It has a way of pulling you into the narrative and makes you really care about the characters. Even Rocket could make you get a bit misty-eyed. Besides the phenomenal voice work, the combat is different but fun. You get to jump around with Star-Lord's boot rockets, which is very similar to the boost pack combat from Starfield. You orchestrate some of the attacks of your teammates, and much like in Starfield, if you don't want to use them, you don't have to. But they are there and they do help. There isn't a lot of space fights, but when you do get to, the space battles are just so much fun. The buttons feel natural, and it has that high intensity feel you want from those dogfights. The RPG elements for the character build leave something to be desired, but the words you say and the choices you make throughout the game have a major influence on the outcome of what happens throughout the journey. It may not have the vast universe to explore like Starfield, but the acting, the combat, and the way choices matter make this game one you should try. Guardians of the Galaxy is available on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and the Switch. You can't make a list of Starfield alternatives without mentioning at least one Bethesda game. In my estimation, Fallout 4 would be the closest to Starfield in most ways in comparison to other Bethesda titles. While it may not be my favorite Fallout game, it is by far the closest in combat mechanics, how factions work, and just overall how you interact with NPCs. The combat not only has similar weaponry to Starfield, but the feel of gunplay feels almost identical. Starfield is a lot quicker to respond to your movements, and to me feels closer to a game like Apex Legends in terms of controls, rather than a Bethesda game. But a seasoned Fallout 4 player could play Starfield and have the controls mastered in seconds. The RPG elements are very similar in character creation and choices during the game to Starfield. The only big difference for Fallout 4 is that you choose perks and you get that perk. In Starfield, you choose a perk and you need to accomplish tasks afterwards in order to get that perk. Still similar attributes and player progression elements, but you have to earn things now. The biggest difference is the setting and the map size. Fallout is about a post-nuclear Fallout civilization, and Starfield is about traveling in space. Similar stories and storylines to a degree, just different locations. If you need to rock out to the beat of Bethesda, Fallout 4 is a great choice to replace that Starfield deficiency. Another game that may appear out of place on this list at first is Cyberpunk 2077. But hear me out. Initially, this game was a disaster when it released, but after years of work from CD Projekt Red, Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the finest open-world RPGs there is. It has so many layers of RPG, so let's start there. You get to fully customize your character's build and appearance, you manage your experience points in an intricate skills tree, and the gear you wear has effects and bonuses to your player's stats. All that and another layer of cybernetic implants that further add experience and customization to your build. It just screams RPG. And it does that part well in my estimation. With all the different options available for builds, it gives a lot of different ways to play through the game. A hallmark of CD Projekt Red is how your choices and actions really change the outcome of the game and its overall conclusion. Cyberpunk 2077 did a great job of weaving all the side quests and characters into the game and its endings. The combat is very similar to Starfield as well. Choose to use your bare hands, knives, swords, or a vast array of ballistic and laser weapons. The smoothness in fights is very similar, with the slight edge going to Starfield. The movement and freedom during combat is there in Cyberpunk, but there is still a little stiffness to the movements. Lastly, this is a futuristic setting with a really in-depth city behind it. There are a lot of NPCs and enemies throughout the map. Cyberpunk makes a vibrant city that is very lifelike, a lot like Starfield cities. But where Cyberpunk may blow Starfield out of the water are the intricate and morally gray stories that CD Projekt Red put together, and they are just incredible stories. There's great combat, amazing RPG elements, a fantastic storyline, and Keanu Reeves. That's a recipe for a game you should play. With the addition of Cyberpunk 2077's Phantom Liberty DLC, there is a lot to like about this game, so check it out. Available on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. And of course, you can't make this list without talking about Outer Worlds. The developers of Outer Worlds have made two of my personal all-time favorite games, Fallout New Vegas and Knights of the Old Republic 2. Obsidian really crushed New Vegas in my eyes and put forth one of the best Fallout games ever. The developers at Obsidian really understand that combat/RPG formula that Bethesda created with Fallout 3, and their version with Fallout New Vegas is evidence of how well they can make an RPG. Outer Worlds is essentially Obsidian's version of Starfield, years before Starfield was finished. It has that great combat system, and the smoothness is there even on the older versions of the game. Outer Worlds adds a slowdown ability that lets you get that RPG-style turn-based combat feel without it taking over the game. For the most part, this is a solid first-person shooter-style combat that has a lot of weapons to choose from, much like Starfield. There's something to be said about not having too many variables with weapons, and both Outer Worlds and Starfield get that balance. The RPG style is next to none. There are so many side quests in Outer Worlds, and you can take or leave the ones you want. It really gives each map a lot of depth. So many relationships to make on the way, and all the choices you make throughout your journey really make a difference. There are a vast amount of different endings interweaving with multiple storylines from throughout your quest, a lot like Cyberpunk 2077. The space travel is there, but not the same degree as Starfield. You can go to a handful of planets in Outer Worlds, so there isn't that insane amount of open-ended exploration. It is not a bad thing, as the stories and quests in Outer Worlds are great and can make you think. It doesn't have the jaw-dropping stats of Starfield or the procedurally generated systems, but it does have incredible space travel RPG gameplay with a solid combat system. Outer Worlds has replayability written all over it, and if you haven't played it yet, you should. Outer Worlds available on PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button and subscribe if you're not already to get more videos just like this. Don't forget to check out twohatsandabeard.com, and as always, check out our YouTube page. This is the Dove. We'll see you next time.